Hello. Hi, everyone. Just gonna wait a little bit here while we wait for people to tune in and say hello. Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Jonathan, and I am the digital marketing manager at BroadwaySF, and we we are very excited to be doing this Instagram live today. We'll be talking with Dale Franzen, who is a producer on Hadestown, which is coming to San Francisco in our 2020-2021 season, and we are so excited to bring it to San Francisco. So thank you for tuning in today. These Instagram lives are part of our Broadway SF from Home initiative. It is just another way for us at Broadway SF to connect with you at home. So thank you for tuning in, and we're excited to have this conversation today. And let's see if we can bring her in. Okay, it just sent the request. Hello, Dale.
Hi. I
Good
did
afternoon.
it.
Yes, we did it. We connected. And how are you today?
I'm good.
Great. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today. We're so excited to hear from you, and we're so excited for Hadestown to come to San Francisco.
We're so excited to come whenever that may be.
Right. Yes. Well, just to introduce you to the people watching at home. So Dale Franzen has over 40 years of experience in the creative arts industry as an opera singer, artistic director, Tony Award-winning producer, educator, public speaker, mentor, and consultant. And she is the founding artistic director of the Broad stage, where Hadestown was first developed in Santa Monica. And she's been a part of Hadestown since 2011, when it was just a concept album, and she shepherded it to Broadway. And she's joining us live from Los Angeles. And I know you wanted to give a shout out to your family in California as well.
I know that California thinks that Northern and Southern are different identities, but I think we've all really pulled together right now in such a beautiful way. And I want to give a shout out because most of my family and some really close friends live in the Bay Area. So I go up there a lot. I love the Bay Area, Berkeley and San Francisco, and all kinds of places. So a shout out to Greg, who is the head of Another Planet Entertainment, a really important group out there, and my brother, who's a judge, and my sister-in-law, and my sister, and my nieces, and all my friends up there. Steve Wasserman, head of Heyday, all my good friends up there. So we're so excited to bring Hadestown to San Francisco because everybody's waiting to come and see it. They're all excited.
Yeah, but we're so excited to welcome you to San Francisco, welcome Hadestown to San Francisco. And once again, for all our fans watching, Hadestown is coming to San Francisco as part of our 2020-2021 season, and memberships are on sale now. So if you want to get your tickets to Hadestown, you can check us out at BroadwaySF.com, and you can find more information of how to become a member and get tickets to Hadestown, as well as other wonderful productions coming to San Francisco. And so just a little bit about Hadestown for people that might not be familiar with it. Hadestown had successful runs at the New York Theatre Workshop, and in Canada at Edmonton Citadel Theatre and the National Theatre in London before it landed on Broadway in the spring of 2019. And it actually just celebrated its 1-year anniversary last Friday. So it's been on Broadway for debuted a year and 1 week. And so it's a very exciting time for Hadestown, I'm sure.
It was, unfortunately, we celebrated it virtually, not in real time, but still, nevertheless, we are so grateful that we had the reception we had last year and did so well at the Tonys, and the response has been just overwhelming. So we can't wait to get back both to Broadway and, of course, to San Francisco and all over the country and all over the world.
Right, yes. And so Hadestown, just a little bit about the show itself. Hadestown intertwines two mythic tales, that of young dreamers Orpheus and Eurydice, and that of King Hades and his wife Persephone, as it invites you on a hell-raising journey to the underworld and back. And Hadestown won 8 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, and Best Original Score for singer-songwriter Anais Mitchell, and Best Direction for Rachel Chavkin. And yeah, so thank you so much for joining us again, Dale. And I just have a couple questions for you, and then we can take questions from our fans watching as well. So the first question I have for you, actually, do you mind just talking about your role as a producer and what it means to produce a show on Broadway, or just a theater in general?
Well, first of all, when I started this project, I was running a theater in Santa Monica, the Broad Stage. So I actually started it with the idea of taking it to my 500-seat theater in Los Angeles. I think we're one of the few shows that actually started in Los Angeles, which I'm very proud of. California born, direct from Vermont to California. But very quickly in the process, my entire creative team was Brooklyn based. So I joined in a partnership with Mara Isaacs, who had already been working at the McCarter Theater at Princeton for years, developing new projects. And it became clear fairly early on that this was going to be developed on the East Coast. And the role of producers is very different in every project. That's one thing I've really learned, not only producing for the nonprofit, but especially producing for the for-profit, the commercial theater venues. Mara and I both came out of the nonprofit. So our feeling about producing is probably very different from a lot of people. We're very hands-on. We're very, very involved in the details. We're very good at keeping the budget really diligent and good and not inflated. Mm-hmm. We know how to nurture artists and give them a safe environment and a fair environment. We also believe in trust, and that trust takes time. And I think that comes out of much more of a nonprofit mentality. But as you've seen last year, it proved to be very successful for the for-profit. Anais Mitchell, who, you know, is just this wonderful unicorn genius from Vermont. I like to say she's the love child of Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell, or something like that. You know, she mm-hmm. comes out of the world of poetry and folk music and indie music and a different type of music than most would consider commercial Broadway. So she had to learn as she was doing this project, you know, how do you do this? So Mara and I, for the first couple of years when we were on our own, we then later got two great Broadway producers to join us, Tom Kierdehy and Hunter Arnold. But at the beginning, it was really about letting Anais have enough time to learn how to do this. How do you tell a story with many characters in really a theatrical way, not just a ballad? And that took time. But I think the time paid off. You know, it really paid off. So I also think a lot of people have said, is it different being a woman producer? And I think it's different in the sense that only 23%, I believe, of the producers. Something just happened. I think it just paused or something.
We're back on.
23% of the producers for Broadway are women. 3% of that 23% are women of color. So we are definitely not the norm so far, although I think that's radically changing right now. And that's a great thing. I do think that women produce differently, but also each woman produces differently. So I can't make a general statement, but I will say that there were things that were very important to us that I don't think a lot of men would think about. Many things I won't go into, but even, you know, on a personal level, dealing with families, dealing with women who had babies we had quite a few Hadestown babies during this process, including our director had a baby, and Anais just had a baby, her second baby.
Oh, wow, wonderful.
So those were things that we as women who have children understand, and maybe we treat them differently and think about it differently. I certainly think women who have children are an advantage, not a disadvantage, and we bring much more to the table, and we have a much bigger vision of the world in some ways. That doesn't mean you have to have a baby to have a big vision of the world. But I think that being a woman producer raises different questions and has some different values that certainly were true for Mara and I in this process. And then luckily, Hunter and Tom totally joined us on that journey and understood where we were coming from.
That's great. And I have a picture here of you and Anais and Rachel and Mara as well. And yeah, so you said this is on the stage of Hadestown?
Yes, that's on the set. I think that's on the Broadway set.
Oh, great.
Uh, and yes, we were all looking pretty happy there. That was a wonderful day. Not quite sure when that was, but one of the many great days, maybe after a performance.
Great. Yeah, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about the journey that Hadestown took to get to Broadway and all the different theaters that it went to and worked with in its process. Because I know that Aeneas had the concept in 2006, and then the first mounted production was in 2011, and the show finally made it to Broadway in 2019. And so I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how that process was and what the journey that the show took to get here.
Sure. So she had the idea started in 2006. The album came out in 2010. I got involved with Aeneas to turn it into a full theatrical idea in 2011. She had done some do-it-yourself, literally, Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney in a barn productions with a group of her very dear friends in Vermont. So actually, the first production was at the New York Theater Workshop in 2016. Between 2011 and 2016, we were developing the show, dealing with all of the, raising the money, doing the legal work, all the things you have to do as a producer, and really developing the script, the book, expanding from songs to duets and ensembles, developing characters. I mean, it's a huge amount of work. Mm-hmm. By the time we got to, and then putting together the entire creative team. So Rachel Chavkin came on, I believe, in 2013, or maybe even a little bit later. And because of her relationship with New York Theater Workshop, they became involved. And that's how we landed there, which was just one of the greatest things that ever happened, because it was such a perfect match for us. Jim Nicola and Jeremy Blocker, who run New York Theater Workshop, are just two of the most important people in developing new work. I mean, last year alone, they had Slave Play, What the Constitution Means to Me, and Hadestown on Broadway. And they are just really have a nose. Jim just has a nose for talent and for picking the right thing at the right moment. So it was an incredibly beautiful and wonderful journey to be with them. And after that, we had a very successful run. Being a producer, you can work really hard and you can open a show and it can be a flop, and that's the end of that story. But we did very well at New York Theater Workshop. And after that, the people that were our initial investors basically said to us, we want to go to Broadway. And this was after Hamilton. This was after Curious Incident, and after shows that were different were starting to do extremely well on Broadway. So Mara and I sat down and talked it all through, decided that we would take that journey, which was a big thing to think about. Had to make a lot of decisions. For example, at New York Theater Workshop, we were in the round, and it became very clear that that wasn't going to work commercially. So we had to go proscenium, which meant we needed another development step. And that's how we got to the Citadel in Canada, which was a very unusual step to take and turned out to be really great and exactly right. We learned so much. We did a huge amount of work there. We changed the set. And because of that journey, we ended up, through many different conversations, getting to the Olivier at the National Theater, which of course was just phenomenal. The National Theater, first of all, just as an American working in England at that time, which was only 2 years ago, they gave us so much rehearsal time and tech time. It was just unbelievable to be embraced in that way and given that kind of luxurious time to really do our work. And because of the work that we did there and the fabulous response we got in London, the wind was in our sails, and that's how we got to Broadway. And each step, I think it's important to know as a producer, each step you don't know exactly where you're going many times. Some producers may, but we didn't know. We weren't sure exactly where we were going after each step, and we gave Aeneas and the whole team time to really do their work and see where we would go. And it was very much an intuitive kind of gut thing as a producing team.
Right, and yeah, and I know that from the first minute that you opened on Broadway, that you've had this crazy fan following, and so I actually have this picture here. This is fans at the theater at Hadestown after the Tony nominations were announced, and that massive crowd and all of that outpouring of love. And I was wondering if you could Yeah, speak a little bit about how the show has really resonated with fans, and what about this show has attracted so much love. I know that our audiences in San Francisco were so excited as soon as we announced that Hadestown was coming. People just got so excited. Um,
Well, I can tell you, if I could answer that question completely, I would be like a genius and I would be the richest person in the world. I wish I could tell you exactly how that formula works. I mean, I have some ideas of how it works, but honestly, we didn't know. You know, when we opened in New York, we had no idea. I remember opening night of previews thinking, well, this will probably go well because it's all going to be fan based. But then it never stopped and it got crazier and crazier and bigger and bigger. I think part of it is actually that we had a journey and we developed foot soldiers. Along the way, we were very lucky, and a very unusual thing happened. When we were at New York Theater Workshop, we were very lucky to be able to do a live album, a live recording of the New York Theater Workshop production. And because of that, that went on sale and that began to spread the word even more than the concept album. And that kept us all those years between New York Theater Workshop and Broadway, which was only 3 years, I think. It kept us going and it developed fan base for us. And then I have to say, you know, the fans are taking over. I mean, the fan art and the response and the cosplay, and it's just been such an amazing response. And I wish I could tell you, we should talk to the fans and ask them, you know, how did this happen? I mean, we are so, so grateful. And it's such a thrill every night when we see them in the house just screaming and yelling and, you know, wrapping their arms around us, and then so quiet at the end when we do raise a cup. And it's just every single night such an incredibly emotional, beautiful journey. That's all I can tell you.
that's wonderful. Actually, yeah. Speaking of fans, we do have a question from a fan watching. I'll bring it up on screen. So, how did Aeneas become involved? As she's not a known Broadway composer. So what was it like working with someone who has had little to no theatrical experience with Aeneas?
Well, when I approached Aeneas to get the rights to develop it as a producer, I said to her, you know, I was an opera singer and I had done 3 productions of the Orpheus Legend. So I could very clearly see how this could be a modern retelling. And I said to her, is your vision to make this a full musical theatrical experience? And she said, yes, that's always been my vision. And it, you know, honestly, I have to be honest, it never occurred to me that she could not pull that off, even though she didn't come from the Broadway arena, because I always knew that this was not going to sound like your mother's Broadway show.
Right.
This was always going to be a very special, very different sound. She has such a unique quality and such a poetic quality. I don't want to compare her to Sondheim, but I think in some ways, when Sondheim first came on the scene, you know, it was such a different sound. Or when Philip Glass first came on the scene, you know, when you have an iconic new sound, it doesn't fit in the way, you know, something that is more acceptable or seen as more accessible commercially. But it never occurred to me that she could not pull this off. So we gave her the time to learn. And she is an unbelievable, I mean, really, I don't think I've ever met anybody who works harder than Aeneas Mitchell. Rachel Chafkin and Aeneas are 2 of the most hardworking women I've ever worked with in terms of trying and striving and working to make it perfect and never giving up. I mean, if Aeneas had her way right now, she would rewrite tons of things. We finally had to say to her, you know, a week before we opened, April 17th, you cannot change anything. We're frozen, you know.
Right.
And that was the hardest thing for her, you know. So I think that's how you work with somebody. And I think also, you know, Lin-Manuel and some of the new voices on Broadway are not who you would call, they're not in the Rodgers and Hammerstein mode. They're not even in the Sondheim mode. They're different and they're new. And Broadway has to keep changing. And the arts have to keep changing, and we have to keep letting new artists in, or the whole thing will just die. I mean, you can't just keep doing revivals. You have to come up with new material. And that's what happened with Hadestown.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I know what about her work and Hadestown in particular really resonates with audiences today. I know that even though this is set has roots in Greek mythology, that there's so much that resonates with audiences. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that.
Well, I think as someone who has performed, read, and now produced Greek myths for many years in my life,
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason why we read these myths. And these myths speak to us. You know, I think it was Joseph Campbell that says there are 9 great stories, there are 9 great myths. And this story of the hero's journey, and in fact, the heroine's journey also, you know, both Orpheus and Eurydice in our production take a very deep journey and a dark journey. And some make it and some don't. And it also speaks to, in a very poetic way, not in a pedantic or academic way, it speaks to our universe and our globe and our world. And it also talks about the intimate ideas and thoughts that we all have as human beings, feelings of doubt, feelings of betrayal. Who are you loyal to? Do you stand alone or do you stand together? When your love is tested, can you survive? How many times do you love and you don't survive? What happens when you have a, as I like to think of Hades and Persephone, a dysfunctional middle-aged marriage? You know,
Mm-hmm.
when you're going through a really bad time, how do you get through that? And when you have the young lovers who are tested in a very hard way, how do you get through that? So everybody in the audience, young, old, Republican, Democrat, you know, every single person on the planet can relate to this. And I've been so profoundly moved at the things people have said to me, and a lot from men. I've been very surprised at how deeply men have especially reacted. At one point, we heard that a lot of single men went to see the show, which sort of surprised us because, you know, 63% of the audience on Broadway is actually women. And this show takes everybody in. We want everyone to feel included, both on stage and in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the reason that it's resonating.
That's really great, and I wanted to talk about what you just said, including everyone on stage and off stage. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the casting of Hadestown, because I know it's such a diverse casting, and it really includes people from all walks of life that can see themselves reflected in the story. I wondering if you could just talk about that. And I have some pictures, some production photos, so people can see some of the cast members. So here we have Andre de Shields as Hades, and
No, Andre is Hermes.
Oh, Hermes, excuse me, Hermes. We have Amber Gray as Persephone. We have Carney, and we have Ava Noblezada. And I was wondering if you could just talk about the casting, and talk about the show, and how this casting came to be, in telling this story.
I think it never even occurred to us not to have a totally diverse cast, but I will give very deep credit to Rachel Chafkin, because it was really her vision. And she did some fabulous things. I mean, there was this kind of sense of people would come in that you would never think would be a worker, you know, or you would never think necessarily would be one of the other leads. And Rachel would see them in that way. And it made it so exciting and so different. Without going into specifics, we've had people, you know, that you would never consider in a musical come and do the show. And in our London production in particular, phenomenal woman who was one of our workers, and people who were not dancers but danced fabulously. So Rachel has a very open way of looking at the casting, and we all supported that and believed in that. I believe we have 80% minority in our cast, which we're all extremely proud of. And we didn't set out to reach that number, but I think it speaks to who we are. It's been very important to us to see the world as the world is, which is a fabulous place of, you know, lots and lots of different kinds of people. And it's one of the reasons I love New York and I love California. You know, we really celebrate our diversity and realize that it makes us stronger. And Hadestown is an example of that, where everybody can see themselves on that stage.
Right.
And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I know that you talked about this earlier in our conversation, but the fact that the creative team, that we have the book and songwriter and the director are women, Rachel and Anais, and you and Mara have two lead producers who are female. So just having that that diversity off stage really can help translate onto the stage of being a welcoming and inclusive environment.
Look, I can't speak to every woman run team or woman kind of fronted team, but I will say that there is no question to me that having four very strong women at the helm um, who have certain values radically changes the room. I just think it does. I mean, I grew up in the arts that were predominantly men. I think I had one female director as in my entire career as an opera singer. And in fact, she wasn't very nice. She felt she had to outdo the boys. And this is a very different environment when you have four very strong women who have very clear values about how people should be treated and safety and honoring certain things. Because, like in my case, I wasn't honored as a mother when I was an opera singer. It just wasn't done. I mean, nobody had children. So I was a total oddity. And now when I see women with children, I think, you know, they need to be honored and respected and held up, not made to feel less or made to feel like they have to hide having a kid. You know, so I think the world has radically changed and women are a big part of that. There's no doubt.
That's wonderful, and I have some pictures that you shared with me of you and the creative team at the Tony Awards. Oops, let's see. Um, and there, there you all are. A lovely
Yes.
black and white photo.
So that's
And
the
oh,
team.
sorry.
That's the producing team, Aeneas and Rachel and Jordan Roth, who's, you know, the head of Drew Johnson and who was the great genius that gave us the Walter Kerr, to which we are so grateful. That was a wonderful night. That was the Tony night.
Great, and yeah, here we all are with, or you all are with your Tonys in tow, and yeah, that wonderful closing moment with the acceptance speech.
Yeah.
That must have been a really wonderful, memorable evening for the whole team, I'm sure.
Definitely memorable. Yes, it was
Yeah.
a lot of hard work, and it's just an amazing celebration. The cast had to work so hard. I remember that crazy day because they had to get up at the crack of dawn, go and rehearse for the Tonys, come back and do a matinee, and then go back and do the Tonys. So I mean, it's a crazy day, and that whole period of time in New York is so nuts. There's so many awards, and we had a good run. You know, we did really well. So yeah, it was a busy time.
Right. Yeah. And just wanted to talk to you a little bit about once theaters are back up and running, once we pass through this, and Hadestown is touring the country. What are you looking forward to about bringing Hadestown across America and to various places around the country, San Francisco included?
Well, I'm excited because there's, you know, we have a very big country and there are many places that I haven't been. So one thing that I'm excited about is going to visit places that I haven't been and seeing what the response is. This is a very big country with a lot of different types of people, and I've mostly stayed on either coast. So I'm looking forward to going into places like Madison, Wisconsin, you know, going to places that I've never been to see what it's like, to see what the reaction is like. I don't know if it'll be the same or different. You know, when you go on tour, you go into bigger houses. The Walter Kerr, I think, is 930 seats. And I think the smallest theater we're going into is probably 1,500, but more like 1,500, 2,000, 2,500. The show's going to be fabulous in those theaters. I have no doubt. I'm very excited to bring it to my own hometown, to the Amundsen, and my own state, to San Francisco. You know, it's so exciting to have it come back to California, which is really where the journey started for me. So that makes me really excited. And I just, you know, this is such a difficult time right now. It's hard to even think about the tour,
Right.
but I think there might be changes. I think the way we do things might be different, but it might be a lot easier on tour than, for instance, going back to Broadway. Different parts of our country have been affected so differently. So it depends on how this whole thing rolls out. And, you know, we can't wait to get back on the road. We can't wait to get back to the theater. We've had a lot of interest from Asia and other parts of the world, and that is just so thrilling. So just to see this whole thing roll out, what could be more exciting than that?
I agree. And just a question for you. just what are your favorite moments in Hadestown, and what are some moments in the show that have really spoken to you? And
Oh gosh, I mean, that's impossible to say because I've seen it so many times. I would have to say, I think there is I call it a Broadway moment, and an iconic moment is definitely Wait for Me.
mm,
Um, that is just such a thrilling moment where everything comes together, the lights, the set, the sound, the singing, the chorus, the movement. I mean, it's just
right.
unbelievably thrilling, and every time I see it, I think, oh my God, this is the most amazing moment. And it was fascinating to watch that moment get built. I mean, at
Mm,
the very beginning, even at New York Theater Workshop, we had the swinging lamps. And that was one of
mm,
the very first ideas that Rachel and Aeneas, kind of revealed and uncovered. But to see it really come together in this, I mean, people go bonkers, literally, at that moment. But there are many other moments. The very last song, Raise a Cup,
mhm,
which we do as kind of a surprise and a curtain closer. And it's almost a cappella with very little band behind it, is such a touching moment that becomes almost like an anthem or a lullaby that sends people out so deeply moved. I mean,
mhm.
so many people have written to me about that moment. And that moment was one of those moments we didn't know, should it stay in, should it not stay in? It's not a very commercial moment. It's
Mhm.
definitely, it was a real risk. For me personally, I always thought that moment was going to be an iconic moment and really say something about the show, and it really does. But there's so many great moments. I mean, when Andre de Shield, just won every award on the planet, walks out at the beginning, and all he does is stand there, and the audience goes nuts. I mean, that's an amazing. I could go on and on. I mean, I love the fates. I mean, there's just, why do we build the wall? I mean, this is, uh, look, the whole show is fabulous. Everybody needs to come and see it.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Um, I was wondering if you could going back to your career as a producer, just talk a little bit about how you came to producing, because I know that you've had such a varied career and worked in so many different aspects of the arts. And what brought you to producing and to help develop new works.
Well, I'd have to go back to my childhood. My father was actually an Academy Award winning film producer and a television producer in the 50s and 60s in Los Angeles. He actually ran ABC.
Oh,
And so I was the daughter of a producer, and I would hear him on the phone, screaming at. I remember he was doing a movie in Italy and screaming on the phone saying, I don't care where he is, get him on the set. And we're losing money. And I
oh
heard all
wow.
these things growing up.
Mhm,
Then I became an opera singer, a classical singer. And even while I was doing that, I produced little things. I always got things going at my children's school. I did things in retirement homes and prisons and hospitals. And I was always the one who was willing to go and do those things.
mhm,
And then when I became the director of the Broad Stage, I always knew that I wanted about 25 to 30% of our identity to be new productions. So that's when I really started producing. We did an opera, we did a dance project, we did theater, we did a lot of things. And Hadestown was the first musical. I didn't quite realize how long it was going to take to get it done.
mhm.
I somehow thought it would be a 3-year project, not an 8-year project. Um, but people always say to me, God, how did you stick with it for 8 years? And I think
Mhm,
you don't even realize it's 8 years. You're just doing your work and developing it and seeing this beautiful plant reveal itself. And
mhm.
it just goes by. I mean,
Yeah.
it didn't feel like 8 years, believe me. You
Yeah.
need you need it every moment. But I
Right.
think I think producing, I think women are actually kind of natural born producers. They say that our brains are much more multi-diverse in that way, that we're able to do a lot of things. And you have to have a lot of different skills as a producer. You have to be great at money, you have to raise money, then you have to watch money, you have to do
Mhm,
budgets, then you have the whole creative side, then you have the whole interpersonal, how hiring. I mean, it's a really complicated thing to produce well. Um, and I think that women are actually have an advantage maybe in that way because we're used to juggling a lot of things. So
right.
this is a shout out to all my sisters out there. Start producing, even if you start in your garage or you start you know, right now during this pandemic on Zoom. You know, just start. I think that's the way you do it. I know, like, for instance, with Rachel Shafkin, she started her own theater company, The Team, you know, in her 20s because she couldn't get work and she wanted to develop her own work. And that has ended up really being the way she launched her whole career in many ways. And I think it's really important for women and everybody to know it doesn't matter how you start, just start.
That's really great. Yeah, that perfectly dovetails dovetailed two of my questions, which is, do you, any advice to people that want to break into producing, and as well as your thoughts and just this speaking to this moment in particular. What do you think that people at home can do, or creatives that are looking for ways to express themselves? And I think that you said it perfectly. Just start and just do.
I think also, you know, I do a lot of mentoring of young artists, and in particular, I've been working with a lot of women artists. I think that there are so many skills that you need. There's almost nothing you can learn that won't help you. You have to learn how to raise money. You have to learn how to be responsible and loyal so that people want to invest in you. I think starting small is fine. You don't have to, I mean, for some reason in my life, I've always started big, but actually I think starting small is probably wiser. You know, instead of becoming an artistic director for another theater, I ended up building a theater. So I don't necessarily recommend that. That was just my road. But a young woman who's writing a wonderful new musical right now is pivoting during this pandemic and doing a lot of things on Zoom and doing a lot of different things. She's even volunteering politically because that has to do with the show that she's doing. So, I mean, I think be as varied as you can, get as many skills as you can. There is no skill that you will not end up using on some level as a producer. I mean that. Study history. History is a great thing to study. Become more varied. Peter Sellers, I believe, was a history major at Harvard. He didn't even study directing at the beginning of his career, but he became this phenomenal director. Right, so, yeah. I mean, just getting a broader view of the world is also important. Read the newspaper, read 3 newspapers a day from various different angles, always looking for stories, always looking at how do you connect with people. And what's, you know, right now I've been thinking a lot about what are the stories that we're going to want to be told when this pandemic is over. And I know that Hadestown is going to be one of them, because it's such a universal story and it talks about dark times. Even though it's a totally entertaining and upbeat show, it talks about the darker moments. So that's a story that we're going to want to hear. Now we have to think about what are the new stories that we're going to want to hear.
Well, great. Well, I just wanted to thank you again for being so generous with your time, Dale. And is there anything else that you wanted to tell our fans in San Francisco about Hadestown, or how excited you are to bring the show to San Francisco, or any final thoughts?
I would just say, knowing San Francisco as I do, and I love you guys so much, I'm expecting everybody to show up in costume.
Oh, yeah.
There's going to be a lot of good costumes showing up, and bring your red flowers. And we just cannot wait to see you. I know you guys will be one of the most fun audiences in the whole country, because San Francisco's know how to party. They know how to have a good time.
Oh, great. And yeah, thank you so much again for your time. And we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today.
It's my pleasure.
And I wish you and your family well during these times.
Thank you. And love to you too. Take care.
Thank you so much, Dale. Have a great day.
Bye.
Great. And thank you so much for tuning in today. This is Jonathan with BroadwaySF, and you can look forward to more Instagram Lives with our BroadwaySF from Home initiative. Thank you for watching, everyone. Bye.